Today we're doing a deep dive into a case that's, well, it's disturbing and it's complicated. We'll be looking at a YouTube documentary called Murdered by Her Church Pastor, and it tells the story of Lauren Phelps.
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher. You think you have it figured out, and then bam, another twist. What gets me about this one is how it really makes you think about, image versus reality. Starts out looking like the perfect life, all happy, and, the whole social media thing. But then things get dark, really dark.
Okay, so at the beginning, the documentary shows Lauren and her husband, Matthew Phelps, as this happy couple, very active in their church.
Yeah, they seem to have it all, right?
Right. Lauren was building her Scentsy business, and Matthew is on track to become a pastor. But then you start to wonder, was any of it real?
Yeah, that's the big question. I mean, think about it. These days, it's so easy to create this perfect version of yourself online. But this case is like a warning sign. It reminds us that, that online persona, it can hide some pretty messed up stuff.
And the documentary starts to peel back those layers, right? We see the cracks in their picture-perfect relationship, especially when it comes to Matthew's finances. He was in deep, serious debt, living way beyond his means. It sounds like Lauren was starting to get really worried about their money situation.
That's the thing about money problems, right? They can be this huge hidden stress in a relationship. People struggling with debt, they get caught in this cycle of shame and secrecy. And that can lead to even more spending just to keep up appearances. That kind of strain, man, it can do a number on any relationship, especially if one person feels like they're being kept in the dark.
It's like a pressure cooker, isn't it? And it wasn't just the finances. The documentary also hints at Lauren having suspicions about Matthew being unfaithful. At first, it seemed like just a feeling she had. But then, later, we find out that she might have actually caught him sneaking out to meet another woman.
Wow, that adds a whole other level to this whole thing. Infidelity can wreck a relationship because it just destroys trust. When you can't trust your partner, especially about something as important as fidelity, it creates this huge gap. It's hard to come back from that.
And here's where things get really strange, even creepy. The documentary shows this dark side of Matthew, this obsession he had with the movie American Psycho. And I'm not talking about just liking the movie. I mean, he was posting quotes, pictures, even dressing up like characters from the movie on social media.
American Psycho is a pretty messed up movie, the main character is basically living a double life, hiding his true self behind this mask of being normal. When you see that alongside Matthew's seemingly perfect life, it makes you wonder, what was he really hiding?
Yeah, it's like he was fascinated by this, violent, twisted world. And his interest in the macabre went beyond American Psycho. A friend of his even said that Matthew would randomly bring up serial killers and talk about what it would be like to actually kill someone.
Now that's just chilling. I mean, it's one thing to be curious, but this suggests something much darker, It makes you wonder, were those just passing thoughts? Or was that a window into, a really messed up part of his mind?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. And then on September 1st, 2017, it happened. Matthew calls 911. He's frantic, saying he woke up from a bad dream and found Lauren dead on the floor. The room was covered in blood.
What's really strange is that his story seems to change as he's talking to the operator. First, there's confusion. Then he starts to add things, change details. It raises all sorts of red flags.
It is. And the fact that he cleaned up the crime scene before calling the police.
Yeah.
I mean, who does that?
Right. That was huge. Cleaning up before calling the police makes it seem like he was trying to hide evidence or trying to get control of the situation. It didn't fit with the whole grief-stricken husband thing.
Totally. And then there's this. Matthew insisted he'd taken a lot of cough medicine and had a vivid, violent dream, and then he woke up to this nightmare. But the cough syrup company came out and said their product couldn't cause violent behavior, so his whole alibi went out the window.
Yeah, at first the cough medicine story was strange, but, maybe possible. But then when that fell apart, it made everything look even more suspicious. It was like, if that's not what happened, what did happen that night?
Exactly. And then while talking to the judge, Matthew just comes out and confesses to killing Lauren.
That confession, though, it's a big moment, but it doesn't really give us all the answers. I mean, was he truly sorry? Or was it just a way to maybe get a lighter sentence? We may never know what was going through his head.
And then investigators find these multiple social media accounts that belong to Matthew. And, well, they show a whole lot more about his, let's just say, his darker interests.
It's like suddenly we're seeing the real him, the part he kept hidden. His obsession with American Psycho takes on a whole new meaning. It's disturbing.
One of these accounts, with the username Marty Radical, was all about that movie. Screenshots, quotes, the whole 9 yards. His other account had this creepy bio: "I'm just a pitiful anonymous drifting into the abstract. I can't seem to tell if I am dreaming anymore." It's kind of like prophetic, isn't it?
It really is. It's like he was blurring the lines between what was real and what wasn't, getting lost in this world of violence and detachment. And that's a scary thought, especially when you think about what happened.
The police think that all of this, his obsession with American Psycho and the stress of his failing marriage and the money problems, they think it might have just pushed him over the edge.
It's a scary thought, right? I mean, what we watch, what we let into our minds, it can affect us. It can affect how we think and what we do. This case is a perfect example of that.
It's such a contrast, isn't it? Like their online life, the way they presented themselves to their community, it was all perfect.
Yeah, but underneath, something else was going on. It makes you wonder what was going through Lauren's mind as she started to see through the facade.
Let's talk about Lauren for a minute. After the murder, her family talked about their grief, but they also talked about realizing that they maybe never really knew the man she married.
That's gotta be so hard to process, right? I mean, it highlights the human cost of this tragedy. It's not just about the crime itself. It's about real people who have lost someone they loved. The pain, the confusion, trying to make sense of it all. It's heartbreaking.
Her dad, for example, he said he wished he'd seen the signs. He wished he could have protected his daughter.
Yeah, that's the guilt and helplessness that comes with this kind of loss. You're left wondering, what if? It's that feeling that maybe you could have done something to prevent it.
And then Lauren's sister revealed that Lauren found out Matthew was cheating. They had been arguing about it just hours before the murder.
That adds another layer of complexity, suggesting a motive. It shows the pain infidelity causes, the strong emotions it brings up.
The documentary doesn't shy away from how brutal the crime was. Lauren was stabbed over 120 times.
That's just horrifying. The rage, the brutality, it's hard to grasp.
Lauren's mother said Matthew was a master manipulator. She thinks it was planned. She said the police told her most of the wounds were inflicted from behind.
That detail is scary. If he was stabbing her from behind, that suggests a level of control, of planning. It wasn't just a random act of violence.
Lauren's family is obviously devastated. Her dad said he'll never forgive Matthew, that he'll take that anger to his grave.
It's understandable, right? I mean, they lost their daughter, their sister, in the most horrible way. The pain of that loss is made even worse by the betrayal. Forgiveness in a situation like that, it's really hard.
In the end, Matthew got life in prison without parole. But the documentary also talks about how viewers might misinterpret this case and use it to criticize Christianity.
Right, and that's an important point. Matthew's actions have nothing to do with Christianity or any religion. It's important not to judge an entire group of people based on what one person does.
Right. The YouTuber says that Matthew wasn't a real Christian. He calls him a fraud and a wolf in sheep's clothing. He talks about what true Christianity teaches: love, compassion, helping others. It's completely different from what Matthew did.
It reminds us that it's our actions that matter, not just what we say we believe. True faith shows in how we live, how we treat other people. It's not about putting on a show. It's about actually living those values.
You know, it's pretty remarkable, but even after this horrible crime, the YouTuber still expressed hope for Matthew that maybe he'd feel remorse and change.
That's a powerful message, isn't it? It's about forgiveness and the possibility of change, even for someone who has done something terrible. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it offers some hope in a really dark situation.
So far, we've uncovered layers of lies, a brutal murder, a family that's been shattered. This is a really complex case, and we've only scratched the surface.
This case really makes you think about hidden lives, the masks people wear, especially now with social media. It's like everyone's obsessed with creating this perfect image.
It's a reminder that sometimes the people we think we know best can do things we never thought possible. We'll go deeper into that in part 2. There's still a lot to discuss.
You know, this case is bigger than just one couple or one murder. Like, it forces us to face this scary reality. What we see isn't always what's real. It's so easy to create an image online, to only show the good parts and hide all the bad stuff, the struggles.
Yeah, like everyone's trying to be perfect, right? On social media, at work, even with their families. But, like this case shows, those perfect images can shatter and reveal something completely different.
Exactly. So how do we deal with that? I mean, how do we figure out what's real and what's fake? I think we have to be more critical. We can't just believe everything we see. We need to look deeper.
I get it. It's easy to get caught up in what people present online. But this case, it's a wake-up call. We need to be more skeptical, even about the people we're closest to.
We have to trust our gut, too. You know, Lauren's dad, he felt like he missed the signs, like something was wrong. It's easy to say that after something bad happens, but it shows how important it is to pay attention to those little changes in behavior, those red flags.
Talking about red flags, Matthew's online stuff, especially his obsession with American Psycho, that's scary. Like, it shows how someone's online activity can give you a glimpse into their darker side. I mean, it's not about judging people for what movies they like, but it's about noticing when something's off.
Totally. And it's not just online, it's those everyday interactions. It's when something doesn't feel right in a conversation. It's that gut feeling that tells you something's wrong. You have to be present, pay attention, and be willing to talk about it, even if it's uncomfortable.
So what can we do? How can we navigate this world where people have secret lives?
Well, I think it starts with being open and honest in our own relationships. We need to create a space where we can talk about our doubts and fears, where we feel safe being vulnerable. That kind of honesty can prevent problems from getting worse.
This case is a sad example of what happens when those red flags are ignored. It shows that staying silent can have terrible consequences, not just for the people involved, but for their families and communities.
It's important to remember, though, that we can't control what other people do. We can't force them to be honest, but we can control how we react. We can be careful, trust our instincts, and get help if we need it for ourselves or people we care about.
I know this case is really dark, but it's important to remember there's hope. There are things we can do to protect ourselves and our loved ones. There are people and resources out there to help us deal with tough situations.
You're right. This deep dive has been heavy, but it's been eye-opening. It makes us think about our relationships, how we see the world, and the masks people wear. It challenges us to be more aware, more present, and to face the truth, even when it's hard.
Yeah, and while we may never really understand why Matthew did what he did, we can learn from this tragedy. We can become more aware and understand human behavior better.
This case reminds us that even when everyone seems to have a perfect life online, the truth is often much more complicated and darker than we think.
This deep dive has definitely made me think. I bet our listeners are feeling the same way. It's a story that sticks with you, that makes you think about your relationships and how you see the world.
You know, if this deep dive has brought up any concerns or questions, I encourage you to talk to someone you trust, a friend, a family member, or a professional. Don't go through this alone.
Before we wrap up, I want to go back to the YouTuber who made the documentary. He really wanted to make it clear that what Matthew did isn't a reflection of Christianity. He called Matthew a wolf in sheep's clothing to show how hypocritical he was.
That's a good way to put it. It reminds us that we can't judge a whole group of people based on what one person does. We have to remember that everyone's responsible for their own choices.
Yeah, he also talked about what true Christianity is all about. Love, compassion, and helping others. Those are the opposite of what Matthew did.
True faith isn't about how you look or what you say. It's about how you live your life, how you treat others.
And even after this awful crime, the YouTuber still had hope for Matthew, that he might find remorse and change.
It shows that forgiveness and change are possible, even in the darkest situations. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it offers some hope.
This case is full of lies, manipulation, and a terrible tragedy. It leaves us with a lot of questions, but it also teaches us about the importance of being aware, thinking critically, and talking openly, especially in this digital age.
We've talked about hidden lives, the masks people wear, and how dangerous it is to blur the lines between reality and fantasy. But there's one more thing we need to talk about: the impact on Lauren's family and how they're trying to find peace and heal after such a horrible loss.
It's just, I don't know, unimaginable the pain they must be going through. Not only losing Lauren in such a brutal way, but knowing the person who did it was someone they welcomed into their family, someone they trusted. That's got to make it so much harder.
It does. I mean, it just turns their whole world upside down. It makes them question everything they thought they knew, not only about Matthew, but about themselves. Like, how could they not have seen this?
And how do you even begin to heal from something like that? There's no easy answer, is there?
No, there isn't. It's a long road. It's full of anger, confusion, guilt, and of course the loss that never really goes away.
And everyone grieves differently.
Exactly. Some people find comfort in their faith. Others might go to therapy or join a support group. The important thing is to let themselves feel the emotions, to work through the trauma, and find healthy ways to cope.
We've talked a lot about Matthew, what he did, and why he might have done it. But we can't forget about Lauren. She was so much more than just a victim.
Absolutely. She had dreams, goals, a whole life ahead of her. It's important to remember that, to focus on who she was as a person.
This whole deep dive has been emotionally draining. This case really makes you think about human nature, about how we hide things, about how fragile trust is.
It stays with you, you know? It makes you question everything, your relationships, the way you see the world.
So where do we go from here? What have we learned?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we need to be more aware. We can't just assume everything is what it seems, especially online.
We have to be more present, pay attention to red flags, trust our gut.
And we have to remember that even when things are really bad, there's always hope. There are people who can help, resources to support us. And there's always the possibility of healing and moving forward, both individually and as a society.
If anyone's interested in learning more, check out the full YouTube documentary, Murdered by Her Church Pastor. It's tough to watch, but important.
Yeah, and keep asking questions, have those conversations. Don't be afraid to challenge your own ideas. That's how we raise awareness, understand each other better, and work towards a better world.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.